Hi, this is Jay Billis of ESPN, and you're listening to the ML Sports Platter.
The ML Sports Platter is back with you all over the major platforms like Spotify, Google, Apple, Stitcher, Deezer, you name it. Download, subscribe, leave feedback, and a 5-star review. That stuff does go an awfully long way. We are presented by Stanley Law Offices, Bryant and Stratton College, and Brian Comboy of Mass Mutual, New York State. Tax-efficient retirement planning today with Brian. Go with them, advisors.massmutual.com. You could be sending a youngster off to college or planning your own retirement, and there's nobody better to go with than Brian Comboy of Mass Mutual, New York State. He can get your financial future in order. We're really super happy about where we're going with Brian and what he was able to do for us. Opened our eyes to some new ideas as well that we just didn't think about. So make sure you lean on Brian Comboy on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and of course, you can get him at advisors.massmutual.com. Brian Comboy at Mass Mutual, New York State, the official financial advisor of the ML Sports Platter. So, here's the thing. I want to get into, before I bring in Will Leitch, the amazing journalist, an author of a new novel called How Lucky. And you probably know him from Deadspin. He was a founding editor there as well. He's huge. He's big time. I'm going to bring him on to talk about the book and his career and some different cool topics. But I want to start with the Aaron Rodgers stuff, the saga of Aaron Rodgers, because I just think Aaron Rodgers is maybe being a little bit of a crybaby here. Here's a guy who wants the Green Bay Packers to do everything he says, right? He wants more weapons. He got mad that they drafted Jordan Love in the NFL draft last year when Aaron Rodgers, in his mid-30s, going into upper 36 years old, going into his upper 30s. Granted, we know he probably has 3 to 5 years of great football left at least. Look at Brady. Look at the rules. Everything is tailored towards the quarterback. There's no doubt about it. But he was also kind of diving down a little bit, right? He was like on a I think a regressive trajectory. And so I think that there's no doubt that Aaron Rodgers, the proof was in the pudding, that the Packers have to look at somebody. I think the issue, of course, was the communication, and I guess from that standpoint, I'm probably on Rodgers' side. I mean, Tampa Bay, Jason Licht, the general manager, and Bruce Arians have gone on multiple shows confirming that, hey, yeah, we took a quarterback, but you know what? Like, we told Tom. Like, we talked about this with Tom Brady, right? Like, we didn't just grab this guy, and by the way, even if they did grab him and didn't talk to him, I don't even know if Brady would be offended by it, A, and then B, I think Brady would know, right, that they took this quarterback for the long term, not the short term, considering that they're coming off a Super Bowl championship and Tom Brady's still playing at a high level. And oh, by the way, they just signed Tom Brady to an extension. So when you look at Kyle Trask out of Florida, who was taken in the second round, I don't think, even if Brady wasn't told, I think you would still think the situation is, hey, I'm the guy. I just signed an extension, right? This is clearly for the long term. I don't even need to ask, and let's all move on. I'm sure he would view it that way. Rodgers doesn't view it that way because Rodgers is kind of a prima donna, and Rodgers loves drama, and Rodgers loves the long, drawn-out plot scenes, right? Like he does. He loves to host Jeopardy and have that in his back pocket as well. Now, that was a personal interest of his. Alex Trebek was his idol. loved the show growing up, blah, blah, blah. So there's some personal interest in there. There's some passion in there that's equal to football. But he's also using it sort of be like, hey, and I can make $30 million doing this. Hosting Jeopardy. 71 days a year is all I need to do this. I don't even need you, Packers. I ain't coming back. Do I think he'll play football in 2021? I do. I think that he's just got, obviously, he's a competitor, right? I mean, number one. But I think something will work itself out. I don't know what, but, I don't know if it'll be Rodgers, figuring it out. I don't know if it'll be the Packers going to him and saying, hey, here's what we're going to do for you. The number one reason why I think Aaron Rodgers, though, is kind of being a crybaby here, right, is his big thing is he doesn't think he's been treated fairly as far as a supporting cast for this Packer team, to which I'm going, you've got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. And I say that because Donald Driver, ring a bell? Devontae Adams, currently, arguably, the best receiver in the NFL. I'd put him at number one, right? Jordy Nelson, Aaron Jones, a guy who has potential to go for 1,000 to 1,500 yards rushing every single year. Really good threat out of the backfield. He's had stout offensive lines. Corey Lindsley, no relation, by the way. Corey Lindsley was there as an offensive tackle, as a center, for 7 years, right? 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 7 seasons. Aaron Rodgers had one of the best centers in the NFL. And he just obviously signed with the Chargers, but he was there with Green Bay. Not many people have a center that quality as Corey Lindsley. I mean, he was really, really good for them. And he was supposed to be a backup center, but because J.C. Treader got hurt late in the preseason in 2014, he came in and started, and he just held the position. He started every game during the regular season as well as 2 playoff games. He hung in there. He battled through some injuries. He signed a 3-year extension in Green Bay. They committed to him. They committed to keeping the offensive line, the way they needed in order to get, Aaron Rodgers the protection he needs. And I don't know. I mean, I look at a lot of the weapons around the NFL. I mean, Aaron Rodgers wants more. Well, what do you want? Do you want Kansas City's offense? Because nobody has Kansas City's offense. Do you want the Bills' offense? Okay, you're not that far away from that. You were 1 win away from the Super Bowl last year, and some bad decision-making, oh, by the way, on Rodgers' part and on Matt LaFleur's part, clearly, of course. If that prevented them from going to Tampa and playing in the Super Bowl. Matt LaFleur, sure, should have gone for it, should have been more aggressive, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But Aaron Rodgers also had a wide open lane to run it in for a touchdown. He blew it on 2nd down. He blew it on 3rd down, right? And so I just look at this situation like, what do you want that you don't have? You have a number 1 wide receiver. You have an offensive-minded head coach. They got rid of your other bland head coach who won a Super Bowl in Mike McCarthy because things were getting too stale, and I agreed with that move, by the way. They went out and got Matt LaFleur. Oh, well, you didn't consult me enough on the hiring of Matt LaFleur. Okay, so there's the other complaint, right? Now, should the Packers have gone to Aaron Rodgers and made sure that he was happy with this? I mean, maybe, probably. But the positive of it is that, and he knew a little bit, they just didn't deep dive enough when they were recruiting head coaches. He wasn't in the loop as much as he wanted to be. And then Aaron Rodgers also, fails to recognize when Green Bay does a positive. They hire an offensive-minded head coach in Matt LaFleur, that doesn't even get talked about. They didn't go out and get a defensive mind, right? They went out and got an offensive mind. And if it was so bad, then why is Aaron Rodgers putting up all these numbers? Why is the system working like basically a freaking football locomotive, right? I mean, what does he want? Does he want Tom Brady's offense? I would argue offensive weapons. I would argue that Aaron Rodgers' weapons are better. I would. Gronkowski, obviously getting up there in age, but he's a big stage player. You know, you knew he was going to do something in the Super Bowl. But like the overall 17-game season right now, I mean, you have to kind of get used to saying that, right? Not 16-game, but 17-game. Like you have a guy who doesn't have the production that he had over the long haul, and he gives it to you in spurts. Okay, Godwin's pretty good, right? Mike Evans is pretty good, but they're both not as good as Devontae Adams. And I don't think as two receivers to two receivers, again, football's a team game. Tampa beat Green Bay with a lot of really good defense as well. Like I might argue I would take Devontae Adams and Valdez-Scantling over at least 20 to 25 teams in the NFL, they're 1s and 2s. Right? Like if you take a 1 and a 2, here's your number 1 receiver, here's your number 2 receiver, stack them up against everybody in the NFL. Or your number 1 option, number 2 option if they play different positions, right? What team is ahead of Green Bay in that regard? What team? KC? Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce? Okay. Are the Bills? You can argue it. Diggs and Beasley. Again, a lot, happens from the system and the quarterback and the offensive coordinator and all, but both of these teams put up monster numbers last year. 2 of the top 3 efficient offenses, 2 of the top 4 efficient offenses in the NFL. Like, you can argue easily that Adams and Scantling are better than Diggs and Beasley. You can argue that for sure. I'm not going to Seattle. DK Metcalf's really good, but I don't think Lockett or anybody else is as good as Adams and Scantling for sure. I'm not going to Indy. I'm not going to Baltimore. I'm not going to Cleveland. Has some players. I wouldn't go there. Am I going to go to Arizona? Maybe. DeAndre Hopkins and plug in number 2. I mean, that number 2 certainly could change really, really fast this year, especially, from the draft in terms of getting Rondale Moore out of Purdue if he ends up being a major star right away. But he's a rookie, right? He's not going to come in and just blow the doors down. He might, but, to come in and have like a 1,200-yard season, let's say, right? I mean, you don't see it. It's just absolutely amazing to me that Aaron Rodgers continues to cry about supporting cast in all this. It's getting old. It's ridiculous. You've had Jordy Nelson. You've had Corey Lindsley, the center, for 7 years of cohesion and chemistry. You've had Donald Driver. You've had Devontae Adams. You have Valdez-Scantling. They just signed Aaron Jones long term. Right? They've gotten a ground game. They've gotten pieces in the backfield and shored up an offensive line. I think they've had probably a good enough defense for the most part to get to another Super Bowl. I think the play calling and the coaching really failed them in the Tampa game, especially at the end of the first half. You can't give up that touchdown late like that. That was more of a coaching, leaving somebody on an island. You can't do single coverage like that. I mean, come on. Like, who does that? You can't do that. So I look at a lot of the other teams in the NFL. I look at weapons across the board. I mean, where am I going to go? Like, where am I going to go to Dallas? Amari Cooper and who? Am I going to go to New Orleans, Michael Thomas and fill in the blank? I'd still take the guys in Green Bay as the top 2. I really would. not going to the Rams. Am I going to go with Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp? I'm still going with the guys in Green Bay. Not going to Minnesota. I like Jefferson, but the number 2 is who? Again, go back. I take Green Bay. Allen Robinson, really good. Who's the number 2? I take Green Bay. Chicago, you got the Giants. Galladay and company, they go out and get Tony in the draft, still take Green Bay. I mean, you go one after the other. The only couple of teams that are at the top with the top 2 offensive weapons of choice and or number 1 and number 2 wideouts, it's pretty much Kansas City and Buffalo. Maybe Atlanta with Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley. You could probably argue him. I mean, Julio is still very productive, but I don't think he's as good as Devontae Adams right now. I think Devontae Adams is superior as far as route running. I think he has better hands. And again, we're splitting hairs because I think both these guys are going to the Hall of Fame. But, what does Aaron Rodgers want? How many quarterbacks have what he's complaining about? He's complaining about not having enough weapons. He's complaining he wants more added to what he has. Who has that? Who has what Aaron Rodgers has and then more coming in? And by the way, if his weapons were so bad, and this is the final thought on this, if his weapons are so bad, then why is Aaron Rodgers the MVP? Right? I mean, honestly, why is Aaron Rodgers the MVP? Why is he putting up all the numbers? Why is he putting up, the touchdowns and the yards and all the rest? Why do you win the MVP? Right? You have to put up monster, crazy, great numbers in order to win an MVP, don't you? Without a doubt. You have to. You have to put up those numbers to get an MVP. Aaron Rodgers did that. I mean, what did he do? Did he do it to him? Did he throw the ball to himself? Did he throw the ball 60 yards down the field and then Aaron Rodgers threw a pass to Aaron Rodgers? Did we miss all the games in another football galaxy? Did Aaron Rodgers run the football for 1,000 yards? I'm sorry, did we all miss something, Aaron Rodgers? No, you were throwing the ball to Devontae Adams. You had A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones in the backfield as a two-headed monster. You had Valdez-Scantling. You had Corey Lindsley blocking for you and being one of the best centers in the NFL. You had a really, really good offensive line. You won 13 games. You were 1 game away from the Super Bowl. And all this guy does is complain about not having enough. And it's absolutely, positively annoying as all hell. I mean, right? Like it's just getting absolutely, positively ridiculous with this guy and his complaining. The ML Sports Platter is brought to you by Ken's Auto Detailing, Liverpool Physical Therapy, Camillus Golf Club, and our great, great friends over at Stanley Law Offices. Together, they'll work to get you the maximum award. I am so thrilled to bring on to the program one of the best journalists out there, one of the best in the business. He's a founding editor of Gawker Media, formerly of Deadspin, a founding editor there as well. National correspondent for MLB.com. That's where I get him a lot. I listen to him all the time on the podcast with Richard Justice and Anthony Castrovins, a contributing editor at New York and a critic for multiple platforms and a contributor as well, New York Times, GQ, The Washington Post, NBC News. And he has published 4 books. And the most recent one is called How Lucky, a novel. We're going to get into that and a lot more with the terrific writer, the terrific contributor, the amazing author, Will Leitch, on Twitter as well, at William F. Leitch. Will, how are you? Welcome aboard. This is great.
I'm very well, thank you. It's beautiful outside. Everyone's taking their masks off. I feel like the world is starting to. Baseball's happening. The Cardinals are in first place. I feel like the world's a good place right now.
There you go. Well, yeah, we're all excited to have a normal summer, hopefully here, and get past all this. And you have come out with another book. I think this is your 4th, right? And it's How Lucky. It's a novel, and it's Stephen King says it's a fantastic novel. You are going to like this a lot. Dive into it here. Give us a deep dive in the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah, so it's a novel, and it's about a man named Daniel. He's 26 years old. He actually has a disease called spinal muscular atrophy, which is a shorthand way of putting it. It's almost like ALS, but for kids. And so he's actually kind of at the end of, like, nearer the end of his life. Actually, this is it's a disease that my son's best friend has. So I've done a lot of research into it, and basically it's almost like a Rear Window sort of book where he witnesses what he believes might be a crime or might be an abduction, and tries to kind of investigate it with his friend and his caregiver. But he also, like, not only does he have this disease, like, he is unable to move. He uses a wheelchair. He only can move his left hand. He can't speak. So the challenges inherently that come into him to try to figure this out, but also kind of learning about his life and kind of his view of the world. I think it's one of those books where hopefully particularly after a difficult time, it's a book that makes you feel good. It's an optimistic book. He's very optimistic and hopeful about the world, kind of despite his condition. So that's the idea of it. It takes place in Athens, Georgia. So there are sports things. I was not going to put a book in Athens, Georgia, and have it take place over the span of 1 week and not have it be during a game week. So there's lots of college football and lots of tailgating, and hopefully it's a fun read for people.
Yeah, what do you hope people say when they get done reading it?
I want them to feel good. To be honest, there are some some scary things that happen in the book, and I think there's but Daniel is to me, he's this incredibly optimistic, hopeful character who has gone through so much and kind of gone through pain and gone through difficulties, but he actually genuinely believes in the goodness of people and that people are all right. And I don't know about you or your listeners, but there have been times I've needed a reminder of that over the last year or two. So I think that hopefully it's a positive book. It's a quick read, but hopefully people will get a lot out of it.
Major bookstores, Amazon.com, online where books are sold. Go get it. It's called How Lucky. Will Leitch, the author, the terrific columnist, author, insider, the Deadspin founder as well here on the ML Sports Platter, talking about this book. Do you prefer when you write a book, fiction or nonfiction? Is there one that you're kind of more of a magnet to, Will?
I've written nonfiction books in the past, and this one I just kind of wrote unsolicited. It was a novel I wanted to try out. And at first I thought it would be easy, right? Because, I've been working in journalism for so long. I'm like, great, I am the god of this world. I can make these people do whatever I want and move them from place to place. I can't do that when I'm doing my journalism. Unfortunately, I've discovered that in journalism and when you're doing nonfiction, if someone does something irrational, when you write about does something irrational or unusual or illogical, we all just kind of shrug and be like, yep, been a long year. People do strange stuff all the time. But in fiction, everything's got to have backup, and everything's got to have a resolution. Everything's got to have like a firm logic behind it. So I actually found doing fiction more rigorous, actually, than journalism, which is scary because I feel like my journalism is pretty rigorous. So apparently, if you ever wondered if there was truth to the axiom, truth is stranger than fiction, it's definitely true because people will believe things that are true a lot more than they will believe things that are false.
And this is actually, I correct myself, this is your fifth book. So as you've gone on through time, do you ever go back to the beginning when you wrote your first one with the sort of the being on edge and not knowing how to approach it maybe, or some of the challenges then that maybe you don't have now because of experience? Do you ever go back to before the first one was even written?
Yeah, I'm afraid to look at those first ones. Some of those were written a long time ago. I will say that this is it's my fifth book. It's actually my first book in about 10 years.
Wow.
Now, for that, I blame my children. They require a lot of effort.
Yeah, they're a lot of work, aren't they?
They really are. So now I can put them in a room, and I feel like they will not set it on fire if I leave it. And so therefore, I can actually sit down and write a book. But I will say that the industry itself has obviously changed a lot in that time. But one thing that's helpful for me is I'm more confident in my voice now. I think anyone when they're younger, they feel like they're trying to go out and prove themselves to everyone. And this is what I can do. Look what I can do. And I'm a serious person. And now, I lived in New York City for 13 years. I moved to Athens, Georgia, where the book is set, about 8 years ago. And I found, generally speaking, that has helped my writing because I'm frankly hanging out with fewer people that work in the media, and I love the media, and I love my work, and every time I go visit my friends that work in media, I love talking about it and digging deep into it. But I also think some perspective helps, and I would say that when I'm in New York, everyone's like, "Oh, did you work for that publication? How's that publication? Did you like that editor?" And here they're like, "Wow, you met Kevin Durant once? That's amazing." And I think it's really they're right and the media people are wrong. It really gives you a better perspective on what you do is not that important. You're just trying to provide entertainment and enlightenment perspective to people. And I think it's made me a better writer, kind of getting out of that maelstrom a little bit.
Go get it online where books are sold, major bookstores. It's called How Lucky, a novel by the terrific writer and author Will Leitch. He's on Twitter at William F. Leitch as well, a columnist for Major League Baseball. We'll get into that in a little bit here as well, MLB.com. And I've been a fan listening to you and reading you for a long time, covering the game of baseball. Before I get to the baseball part and maybe another one or two on the book, why has Deadspin worked?
Well, I think I'm not sure it works as well now, and they've got a different crew running it. But I think that one of the reasons that Deadspin, I think now Defector, which is the former Deadspin staff, I think one of the reasons that it has always worked is two reasons. One, I think that they have taken sports as a whole rather than listen, when you work in sports, whether you're a beat reporter covering the football team, or you're a columnist, or you're an editor, or you're a sideline reporter, you inevitably worry about other media people, and you worry about kind of your niche, right? You worry about okay, I have to know this team really well, and so I just focus on this thing. Or you worry about the media industry at large. So I think one of the advantages that Deadspin and now Defector have always had is they're just they're outside of it. They don't have contracts with teams. They're able to actually cover sports as sports, not as part of this global entertainment complex. And I think there's a lot of really good reporters at ESPN, to be clear, but it's difficult by nature for ESPN to truly write in a unsparing way about the NFL, because they are massive business partners with the NFL, and there's just a ceiling of stuff they're just not going to go to. It doesn't mean there's not good reporters there. They don't do good work. It just means that there's a need for that truly kind of holistic outsider voice that I think that Deadspin and I think now Defector are, and not just them. There's other sites that do this, but kind of those two. I think that's one of the things that they've really been able to benefit from, is to be able to look at sports in a macro sense. In the early days of Deadspin, it really kind of blew people away that Deadspin would report on ESPN personalities and things, and an actual news, the stuff that would happen with them. And I always found that strange, because I noticed very quickly when I was doing Deadspin that a lot more people knew who Chris Berman was than the shortstop for the Tampa Bay Rays. And so it felt very weird to say, "Oh, we're not going to write about this stuff, but we'll write about this stuff." The whole idea was there was a disconnect between the people that worked in sports and the people that, the fans, the consumers, the people that pay for everything. So that was always the idea, and I think it's something that they do continually pretty well today.
Modern media is wild. We have a million channels, the internet, social media. Some people didn't go into media, didn't major in journalism, didn't do it the traditional way, and they are 18, 19, and they can be in media because they can just go on and just do reps, buy a microphone, and buy a wave file system, and do a podcast, and record videos, and just get reps, and in a couple of years be really, really good, probably. Modern media today, the way it is, how we cover it, journalists, whether it's news, politics, sports, whatever, what do you like the most about modern media, and what do you hate the most?
I think what I like the most is the opening up for new voices. Certainly there was a very closed system, and frankly a closed system that very much benefited white men for a long time, where there were you either had to go through this channel, and if you didn't go through that channel, there was no way for you to succeed. I think one of the great things is, there are so many voices now, but that means you can hear voices that were unable to be heard before. And I think that has improved generally the coverage of a lot of issues that I think were just ignored in the past because they were just blind spots for people. And now to hear all these, not just new voices, but voices that frankly had been ignored or silenced even in the past, to me, that I think it's made covered. I understand sports and I understand the background stuff that I would have just not understood 20 years ago. And I think that's an unquestioned positive that I think really should not be overlooked, because I think we forget that because social media can kind of wear us down. But like in a lot of ways, more voices are good, but the problem is, of course, figuring out how to filter them. And I would say my frustration sometimes is I feel obliged to remind people, and I am on Twitter, you're on Twitter, we are in the media, we use Twitter. But like at a certain level, in fact, the vast majority of people in this country do not use Twitter and do not actually look at it all the time. And because there's something with the personality of a person, myself included, who works in media, you want to know what the news is all the time. You want to know what's going on. You're addicted to find out what's happening. What's the news? What's the news? What's the news? Twitter becomes less like a portal or like a portal. I feel like Twitter should be used more like a police scanner, but it's kind of being used as like the editor and the assigning editor for a lot of media people. And I think that it gets lost a little bit that Twitter is important. It is undeniably important, but it should not be the assigning editor. And I think there's this idea that somehow if someone said something on Twitter, well, this must be a story, and it ends up like all kind of compiling on itself, and you end up having stories that are about nothing and like things that people are not actually talking about or not actually big deals at all, but they feel like they can click, or like reporters feel like they'll get more likes or retweets or something or more engagement, and it turns it into, frankly, what the kind of exhausting thing that we have now, where getting actual news and actual reporting is incredibly difficult. It's still there. You just have to sift through so much other stuff to get there, and I think that can be pretty frustrating.
You put in, obviously, a lot of work covering Major League Baseball as well, MLB.com. Just awesome work across the board. Where are you at with the game today? Are you still into it as much as you used to be? I mean, this overpowering of analytics, it's home run, strike, or walk. The game takes forever, pace of play. There aren't really many great teams anymore. Everybody seems to be just around 500 or a few games over. Is the game enjoyable to you, and do you think it's in trouble long term?
I don't. The game is definitely enjoyable to me, but I'm an easy mark. Like I truly love baseball, and the game could. Like, I'm one of those people that, like, I'm sorry, there's nothing else I'd rather do than watch a baseball game, so I don't care if they're long, but I understand that is not always necessarily the overarching everyone's viewpoint. I would say, however, I always beware a little bit. Like, baseball has been in trouble since I've been alive. There has literally never been a time where baseball has not been like even the times that we think of the boom times of baseball, we think of the golden age. Everyone was complaining about baseball all the time. This is one of the things but this is not to say that baseball does not have things that need to be fixed. I think the three true outcomes thing is a definite issue. The length of games, I think, is part of the issue. I think pace of play is really just the fact that there seems to be a lot of time where there's a lot of sitting around, and you don't want to take away too much of that because you lose kind of the cerebral nature of the game, but you also want to make sure there's a lot of action. So I understand there are issues to be resolved, but I also am just wary of, like, one of the things I love about baseball, one of the things I think baseball is always going to have as an advantage is this thing. People that love baseball or have loved baseball love it deeply, and they're hesitant of change, but there's this weird dichotomy of, like, they're very suspicious of any sort of change, but they also believe things should be the way they were when they first fell in love with the game at some big point in the past. Like, and so it's weird to me because, like, I look back now, I remember when, like, I was in high school and college, and Ken Griffey Jr. would go to hit, and he'd be wearing his hat backwards. And all the people that are now my age, who are my age, the age I am now back then, were saying, "Oh, well, this is terrible. Mickey Mantle would never do this." Back in the heyday of baseball, and you look at 1961. I mean, for crying out loud, Roger Maris broke Babe Ruth's record, and Yankee Stadium was half full. So, like, at a certain level, like, you know, there's an instant inherent idea of nostalgia for the past. Now, I think that what baseball really needs to do is to continue to concentrate on young fans and try to emphasize that. The problem is when they do that, all of these old fans who are also complaining that baseball's not as good as they were when they were a kid, wait, you can't change that. Stop trying to the game to try to make these young people like it. So I feel like baseball gets kind of stuck in a way that like football or the NBA doesn't. The NBA and the NFL are constantly changing rules all the time, and nobody cares. Nobody looks back at the NBA and says, wow, when George Mikan played, the league was so much better. Like no one says that. And I think part of that is people expect so much from baseball. They expect baseball to be the way it was when they fell in love with it, and they want it to constantly not change, but also to constantly get better. and so I think that it gets stuck in this thing. I think there's stuff that baseball needs to work on, but also, again, when I was in high school, everyone kept telling me, no one's watching baseball anymore. No, it's not very popular. It's not a very big thing. And I'm sure that was happening when my parents were in high school. This is what baseball is. People complain about baseball because they love it or have loved it at one point in their life. And so it's a tough spot for baseball, but I also understand that it's literally impossible to please everyone.
And you're a diehard Cardinal fan, right?
Yes, correct.
And so when did you first fall in love with the Cardinals?
Yeah, it was those 80s teams. I was about 7 or 8 years old.
Ozzie Smith.
I saw Ozzie Smith and Willie McGee. And again, this is another key thing, right? Like, I feel like this is part of not just being a baseball fan, but it's just being a person, a writer, a person. Like, I love that style of baseball. Like that's how I fell in love with baseball with Ozzie Smith making diving plays and Vince Coleman stealing 130 bases, and William McGee hitting triples into the gap, and just this fast baseball or Whitey Herzog, Whitey ball, and all that. And I grew up loving that. But like that does not mean that like that is the actual best way to play baseball, or that's what it should be now. And I think people do get kind of stuck in that mindset a little bit. You have to constantly be growing and constantly looking for new things. There are things that baseball needs to fix. I don't think there's any question about that. But this idea that like, I mean, those teams, I love baseball, but I don't know if baseball's actually supposed to be like that. You go back and look at it now, and it's like, wait, those guys weren't getting on base at all. Like a team like those guys were throwing like 83-mile-an-hour fastballs. Like the game has changed in a dramatic way, and so there are adjustments that need to be made. But for me, you know, it's baseball's in kind of a weird transition point. But I do not think I think it's a difference between a transition point and like an obvious downward slope. And I don't think it's there.
The terrific columnist, writer, contributing editor across the board. Go follow him. Go get him at William F. Leitch on Twitter. The new book, it's a novel, and it's terrific. How lucky. Major bookstores, Amazon.com, and anywhere really online books are sold, covering Major League Baseball and contributing to the New York Magazine and all sorts of different things. The founder of Deadspin as well. Will, this was a treat for me. Like I said to you before the interview, I've been a big fan. I've been reading you and listening to you for a long, long time. And when the email popped up that I had an opportunity to bring you on the podcast, I jumped right at it. And this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Please, it's my pleasure. Good luck with everything, and have a great summer. I really believe this summer is going to be wonderful, and I want everyone to enjoy it. I'm sure we'll find plenty to complain about, but like it's been a long
like baseball.
Year. Yes, it's been a long year. Let's all try to enjoy ourselves this summer. Let's go ahead and have some fun.
The ML Sports Platter, all over the major platforms, were brought to you by Barks and Rec Doggy Daycare, Rosie's Corner, the Vince Aguirre Consulting Group, and Welch and Company Jewelers. Log on to welchjewelers.com today. That's welchjewelers.com. Shop the showcase at welchjewelers.com. They've got unbelievable choices. Wedding rings, engagement rings, necklaces, bracelets, and more, watches, you name it. They have it all. Of course, Welch and Company Jewelers is a proud ML Sports Platter sponsor. Also, wanted to quickly say thank you to the Swan and Whitaker families for their support of the Platter as well. Will Leitch, how good was that? I mean, I've been following him for so long. I miss him on the morning lineup with Richard Justice and Anthony Kastrovitz. That podcast is no more, but man, I'll tell you what, when you're the founding editor of the Gawker Media former sports blog Deadspin, and I think in the beginning of the interview, or in the beginning of the podcast, I actually had explained that wrong, but it's just founded Deadspin, and he's just absolutely amazing. So really, really good stuff to have him on there, and of course the contributor to Major League Baseball, New York Magazine, and 5 books he has now authored. Go get them all, including his most recent one, How lucky. Mike Lindsley with you, ML Sports Platter. Again, thanks for listening. Download, subscribe, leave feedback, and a 5-star review where you get podcasts on your smartphone device. As I always tell you, enjoy the games.